Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Megan Tady, author of the debut novel Super Bloom. New York Times bestselling writer Amanda Eyre Ward wrote about the novel. Super Bloom is a true delight, hilarious, poignant, and as much of an escape as a spa day in the mountains of Vermont. Who could resist a novel about writers, romance, and the nuances of friendship? Not me. Take Super Bloom along on your next getaway. Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, if someone hasn't yet heard about your debut novel, Super Bloom, how would you describe the novel?
Yeah. And that was such a nice quote from Amanda. Thank you for reading that again.
Absolutely.
Super Bloom is about a massage therapist who is about to lose her job at a spa in Vermont, and she is grieving the loss of her love. So readers are meeting her sort of at the bottom of the barrel, and she's got one chance to save her job, and that's to get a glowing review from the most demanding client, famous romance novelist Carmen Brons. And Carmen breezes into town and sort of sets Joan on a new journey. I won't say too much more. I don't, no spoilers, but that's the sort of the quick synopsis.
Sure. Do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to writing Super Bloom?
I remember it so clearly because I was getting a massage in Vermont at a spa. My husband surprised me on a getaway, and I live in Western Massachusetts. So we zipped up to Vermont, and I was getting a massage from a woman who just didn't seem like she wanted to be there, and the whole time, my face was in the face cradle. And the whole time I was wondering, what's her deal? What's her story? What's going on with her today? And I have a journalism background, so I always kind of want to get to the heart of what the story is. And I feel like everyone has a story. And so I had all these interview questions ticking through my head, and I started to wonder, what's it like to work here? Do her hands hurt? Am I the fifth massage of the day? So I got up from that massage really with this novel idea flooding through my head and walked out of there thinking, maybe she's a character. Maybe I cast her and I give her a story because I didn't know it. It felt too awkward to ask. So the story was really planted during that massage.
And had you written fiction before then? Or
yeah, I had
what
been
kind of led you
dabbling.
from that idea, walking out of the massage, to sitting down and actually writing the novel?
So, as I said, I have a journalism background. So I'd been doing a lot of nonfiction writing and journalism for years. And I worked at a nonprofit in Florence, Massachusetts, and had just recently started my own writing and editing business called WordLift. And in that time, I have always been a huge reader. I have been a writer from a young age, but I just never saw myself writing fiction, and I didn't, quite frankly, have the confidence to do it. And I began to dabble with short stories, and I had started taking some writing classes with someone locally, and still I didn't have the confidence for a novel. It's just like, that seems just beyond me. But then this idea struck, and I had never had it come so fully formed. So I left that trip very much dedicated to this idea, maybe I could write this novel. And I took the idea back to this writing class, and I started to, write those first pieces in that class, which was really exciting endeavor. And, from there, it took me 8 years to get to where I'm sitting now.
And can you tell us a little bit about those 8 years? What was kind of the journey from sitting down and starting the novel to now talking about it as it's about to be published?
Yeah, so I think I wrote that first draft in about a year, and I gave it to my writing instructor at the time, Her name is Dory Ostermiller of Writers in Progress. And she gave me great feedback, and I worked on it again. And then I sent it off to agents, really expecting that I was going to blow someone's doors off. Someone was going to be like, oh my gosh, she's incredible. And I heard nothing from no one. And that was quite loud. And I realized I had quite a lot of work to do. I mean, basically, trying to get a book published is like thinking you can just join like an elite sports team without ever like practicing in the backyard for years, for years. And so I realized it was very humbling. I realized I needed to really study the craft. And at the same time, I was running my business full time. I then had 2 babies. I had 2, my kids are still quite young. They're 4 and 7. So much of my writing time was just, kind of snuck in around the edges of my life, or a few, even half an hour here before my work day started. So things were slow. It took a really long time. And I think it was only a few years ago that I then again sort of recommitted to the novel. Mm-hmm. It was right before the pandemic. And I started taking more classes again. I started really studying the art of writing the query letter and getting the agent. I started listening to podcasts of authors who had failed a lot. We kind of hear these overnight success stories and think that should be us. And it was really helpful for me to hear so many novelists have novels in a drawer. That's very common. And then really reading fiction in a different way, studying the 3-act structure, looking for those inciting incidents, taking books apart and really understanding what makes them such a success. So that took a while. And then, the querying process takes a while. It's a long slog for many people. And it just took a while. And I had to kind of keep recommitting to the book and not giving up.
And what do you think kept you in there? Because as you said, I mean, when you first sent it out, it was just silence. There are a lot of people who can't get from that step of having a finished manuscript and then kind of, for the lack of a better word, just kind of withstanding or withering, just kind of dealing with the rejection. How do you deal with that yourself?
The rejection's really hard. I think I got 70 agent rejections along the way. And I think it's important to talk about instead of be embarrassed by, because that's pretty normal. I got lots of full requests from agents who ultimately passed on my manuscript, but some of them gave me really incredible feedback that was really important, including the agent I have now. She first passed on my manuscript, but she wrote me the most beautiful rejection letter. And in that, what was just incredible feedback that I was able to take and sort of fine tune my manuscript for another 9 months alongside my writing group, which was really helpful. I think, it's like I'm just a determined person, and once I got so far into the book, I couldn't imagine scrapping it after I had been working on it for so long. I loved the characters. I didn't want to give up on them. I did take breaks, sanity breaks. I started a different novel, which actually was the sort of seeds for the novel I'm working on now. But, it's just this entire publishing process is just riddled with rejection. And even when you get your novel published, you have rejection. I'm on the other side of it now. I'm a few weeks into publishing, and you're still facing negative reviews, or someone doesn't, invite you on their podcast, or a wonderful author decides not to blurb you. Like it is, rejection central, so you have to kind of get used to it and also build in some support networks. And my husband on rough days reminds me that I'm doing this not for the acclaim or the accolades or the payoff, which is not big, but because I love writing, and I love the actual act of doing it. And my best days as a person, a human, a mom, a partner are the days I've touched the page in some way. So I have to now remind myself of that on the days that seem hard.
That's great. What was your writing process when you were working on that initial draft of your debut novel, Super Bloom? Were you someone who, before you started writing page one, you did an extensive outline, or did you just kind of have that idea from your massage experience in Vermont and kind of think about it and then dive into the narrative? How did that work for you?
I had no outline, and I'm, for listeners, there's the idea that you're either a pantser or a plotter. If you're a pantser, you fly by the seat of your pants as you write, and plotters, you plot it out. And I've never been an outliner, even in school. I hated writing outlines, and I find that quite tedious and boring. So I just sort of wrote very linearly, like I wrote from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what I was doing. I just was trying it out. Now that I'm working on my second book, I have a better sense of the 3-act structure, how to do pacing, and not that I need to sort of completely copy what other successful novels are doing, but there's a reason why they work. So understanding the rules and then being able to break them and deciding to break them is really important, So now I feel like I have a better sense of that. I have a better sense of how to up the stakes for my characters, how to build a sort of supporting cast around my main characters and give them more richness to their lives. So those are important things for me to do. But in the beginning, I didn't know. And I also think that's okay. As an emerging author, and for people who maybe are listening are like, could I do this? I couldn't have gotten to my final draft without the first one, without making mistakes. I don't even want to call them mistakes, without, making those first brush strokes that I could then go back to and delete. And I also think in the beginning I was very, I was very scarce with my words. I felt like there was a scarcity. That's what I'm trying to say, with what I could get out of myself. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of sort of playing on the page scared me, because I didn't know if I could really do that. What did that look like? It felt like my time was so limited, so everything had to be just right. Mm-hmm. So I was sort of afraid of that creativity, of allowing myself to sort of play. And now I'm less afraid. I'm less afraid that that suddenly the tap is going to stop with my words, that I know that there's more there. And so it's just an evolution, and I'm still learning. I still feel like I have a ton to learn. That's just quite a roundabout way of answering your question. I'm not sure if I totally did, but
it's interesting. Yeah. And you make an interesting point that I haven't heard honestly from a lot of the writers that I've interviewed. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. Are you able to pinpoint how you were able to become more free or get more comfortable playing on the page? Because I think that's an important thing.
There's a really, I think, pivotal moment for me in writing Super Bloom. So Super Bloom, it's a nested novel. So you get a novel inside a novel, basically. You get to see my character begins to write the book that sort of transforms her life. And in the beginning, and for many years of writing this, I had her describing what she was writing. And I took those pages to my writing group, and they came back and they said, these are boring. We don't like this. We want to see what she's writing. And I was so petulant about that. I was like, no, I'm years into this. This is the last thing I want to do. I didn't trust myself to be able to write in my character's voice, knowing I would need to slightly alter it. I knew that novels within novels are up against some difficulties. It's a challenge to hook readers for your own book. Then you're trying to hook them for a second book, a second cast of characters in your novel. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I was a little nervous about that. But I just said, okay, I'm going to go try this. And trying it opened up a whole new world for me. It became this plot point or this tool that allowed me to avoid getting steeped in backstory about my character, my character's love interest who's died. I could give pieces of him to this fictional character. And I saw what sort of playing on the page allowed me to do and gave me some freedom. It wasn't as scary as I thought. I didn't have to write as much as I thought I'd have to do. And it's such an important aspect of the book now. I can't imagine it without it. So I think that was a really pivotal moment for me thinking, okay, there isn't this scarcity of words inside me. And also writing things, some of the things I didn't end up even using, and writing all of that isn't a waste. It's not, even if I don't end up using it, it's a really important groundwork I'm laying in my own mind for what's happening with my book and my characters, even if my readers never read it. Does
That's
that
interesting.
make sense? Yeah.
Oh, it does. It does. Have you ever read Misery by Stephen King?
It's so funny. No, I've watched the movie, which is incredible. And someone else suggested that. Stephen King's such a master. And also I think I'm terrified. I can barely watch Stranger Things. I get really
It was
scared.
definitely, it was years ago since I've read it, but
Yeah.
it was definitely for me one of his scariest books. I'm not really interested in the supernatural type stuff. But the reason I
Same.
mention it is because there's a novel within the novel. I don't know if you are aware of that.
I am. Yes.
Yeah.
I know.
Which is interesting because it's a romance too. So
I know. Yes, I am aware. I just don't know if I can do it.
I highly recommend it. That's stuck in my head after reading it. But
that's interesting.
So I know your novel is being published by Zibby Books, which is a book publisher created by Zibby Owens, a book ambassador and a host of the podcast Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And I also interviewed Zibby on a previous episode of this podcast. How has your experience been with Zibby Books?
Oh gosh, I'm having an amazing experience. I feel so fortunate. And, I'm glad my journey took as long as it did because I wouldn't have ended up with them otherwise. And they're a rather new imprint. They publish one book a month, which means, 12 books a year. So your book is the lead title for that month, and everyone's focus is on you. Zibby and her team, she has a wonderful team of people, and my editor are really committed to just allowing the author to have more transparency in the process, more agency and voice in the process. I can't compare my experience to anything else because this is my first time, but when I talk to other authors, who say, wait a minute, you got to, be in a meeting about your cover and you had 6 covers to choose from, or wait a second, you're going on this massive tour and holy cow, so I'm hearing that from other people who have had different experiences, and it's allowing me to enjoy this experience even more. So I'm really grateful. My editor's been amazing through Zibby Books, and it's also drummed up a lot of camaraderie around all of the authors. Many of us are on text threads and cheering each other on, supporting each other. which feels incredible. They did a whole author retreat with all of us last October in the Catskills. I mean, it's just been amazing. So I've sold them my second novel already, and that also feels like a dream. I am working on it now, and it's due in a couple weeks, and I'm close, but I'm not quite finished. So I've been, working on it, and that's a new thing to be working under contract. But also really exciting now to have my agent and my editor, to help me if I write myself into a corner. So I'm in a different place, which feels really amazing.
That's great. What has the experience been writing the second novel compared to the experience of your first novel, which took 8 years to end up getting published?
Well, it's definitely different. I'm writing under a deadline, and it's both difficult and challenging and also quite freeing. I'm not trying to win anybody over at this point. They've purchased the book. They love the idea. The book is called Champions for Breakfast. It's a completely different novel about estranged mom and daughter, alpine ski racing champs. One was an Olympian. The daughter was going to be an Olympian, but went to art school instead. And they are stuck in a Swiss town when an avalanche socks in the village. And I'm having a blast writing it. I love the research aspect of writing novels. For Super Bloom, I interviewed a ton of massage therapists about what it's like to work in a spa and to do that job. And for this, I'm interviewing former Olympians and elite athletes about what it's like to devote your whole life to a sport. And then by sort of age 30, you're too old or you're injured and you kind of retire and become a sort of normal civilian. And what do you do? So that's been really fun. I feel like I have more confidence as I'm writing. I feel like I know so much more. Mm-hmm. And yet, I'm about to send my novel to my editor. She hasn't read, she's only read the first 50 pages. So I'm prepared for the edit letter and there's holes here and here and here. But I love that process. I love the editing process to be told, all right, here's where we strengthen it. Here's our opportunities. And to go back in, it's almost like a painting where you're then kind of fine tuning it. I love that process. So I'm thrilled. It took me a while to sort of say out loud, I want to be a novelist and to share that with my family, with my friends. It sounds so absurd in some ways, and now that's what I'm doing, and that's what I am aiming for my future, along with running my business still. And I'm thrilled that that's what's happening.
That's great. What writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories or novels?
I think writing groups are really essential. And I think that advice is sometimes hard. Like, how do I just form a writing group? Like, anyone around? But there are some resources online that can help you connect with other writers. One is a podcast called The Shit No One Tells You About Writing. And the author, Bianca Murray, who hosts that podcast, on Twitter twice a year, usually she does a matchmaking process for writing groups. And you email her and say, I'm working on a YA novel and I live here. And she will help connect you with your writing group. There's also something called the Manuscript Academy. And there's just, even just searching how to form a writing group. There are lots of communities out there that will help you form those connections. And then I think also if you're working on your draft and preparing to send your pages to an agent, read your chapter out loud, your sample chapters, before you kind of rush and send it out, because sometimes you do only get that one chance. Pause, read your work out loud. Doing that, it really allows you to catch the times that you're repeating words over and over again, or maybe your sentence is clunky in a way that you hadn't, seen it before because you're just in it, right? You haven't been able to lift your head up, and reading it out loud allows you to lift your head up and finesse it in a completely different way.
That's great advice. What novels have you read recently that you enjoyed?
Oh gosh, I'm usually reading like 8 or 9 novels at one time. They're strewn about my house, and my 4-year-old thinks every book is a Zibby book, which is so cute. I'm looking on my shelf right now. I am reading a memoir by Greg Marshall called Leg, which is so funny and hilarious. The subtitle is The Story of a Limb and the Boy Who Grew from It. It's incredible and funny and just fantastic. And he shares my agent, which is how I got in touch with him. I just finished Amy Popple's novel, The Sweet Spot, which just, she has a theater background, so her dialogue is fast and funny and witty and snappy. And I am in the first few chapters of a book called The Skin and Its Girl. This is literary fiction by a woman named Sarah Cipher. And Sarah runs the 3-penny, oh gosh, I might be butchering it, but I think it's the 3-penny editing services. And I turned to her services a couple years into writing my book and worked with freelance editor to help me figure out, where am I going wrong with this book? So she's just an incredible writer, and her book is beautiful.
And how was it using an outside editor like that? Did you find it useful?
I found it so useful. And I actually did that several times over the course of those 8 years. And each time I kind of needed help with different things. And I think with Sarah, I actually worked with someone else in her group. It was looking at the first, 50 pages. And then a few years later, I tapped someone to say, I'm getting a lot of hits from agents who think my first 50 pages are really strong, but, they end up not offering representation after they've read the full thing. So what is falling apart? What's not holding together? And I couldn't see it because I was so in it. And so I was able to then have an editor kind of give me that bird's eye view of like, oh, I think this thread here is not completely tight, or this storyline here isn't quite what it could be doing. And, you don't always need that. They can be expensive. So I had to, that's another reason why this took many years. I couldn't always afford that sort of help. And that's also where the writing groups come in, because those are free. And you also have to do it for other people, which allows you to be able to understand to articulate why things are working and not working. But if you can, I think it's great. It was really helpful for me.
That's great. Where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and your debut novel?
So I'm on Instagram at Meg Tady, and my website is megantady.com. I have a ton of events coming up near and in Massachusetts and New England, and then I'll be in LA and Colorado. So I'm bopping around this summer, and I would love to see people.
That's wonderful. Well, again, we've been speaking with Megan Tady, author of the debut novel Super Bloom. The novel is available now, so go buy a copy. And Megan, thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Absolutely.